Welcome to Independent Sources in our last episode for 2009. I'm Gary Pierre-Pierre.
And I'm Viano Ravinka. This week, networks and newspapers will no doubt present their year-in review editions, highlighting the major news events in the last 12 months, Barack Obama's historic presidency, possible healthcare reform, and the ongoing wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
On Independent Sources, we've decided to end the year by looking back at a few special segments from the ethnic and immigrant press, stories that got little or no play in mainstream media.
Some of the topics were deadly serious subjects like black communities caught in the crossfire of gun violence.
Others were more encouraging, like the story of a small website making a big impact with news from Iran in a Spanish-language weekly that's not just surviving, but thriving.
Then there was a profile of a Muslim rock star who's been called the Pakistani Bono by a Jewish journalist.
And those young Jews who were bringing home the bacon.
We'll have those stories and more after this.
Ethnic media is growing media, and the rest of the media is shrinking because it seems like ethnic media is the part of the media that's doing better and maybe is like the hope for the future.
Crime in New York is reportedly at its lowest in 40 years and is down in many black communities. Still, the numbers and the fear in some neighborhoods remain high. So when the Amsterdam News ran a provocative picture of dozens of young black men and women killed in South Jamaica, Queens over the years, Gary explored the ongoing issue of violence in black communities.
Over the past year, crime in New York has reportedly fallen by 10%, but some neighborhoods in Brooklyn still record relatively high rates of violence. Abby Ishola spoke with one city council member about a cure for crime in his district.
Crime is down throughout New York City, but in areas like East New York and Brownsville, Brooklyn, the number of incidents are still high. Just recently, a 17-year-old boy was shot and killed in front of this Brownsville bus stop. Residents in the area are feeling the pain.
My heart is breaking because I lost my son about 20 years ago. He was 22 and he was killed the same way.
While citywide crime decreased by more than 10% since last year, Brownsville's crime rate went down by less than 5%. The area's neighboring community, East New York, recorded 12 murders for all of last year. So far, this year, there have been 28 killings. Residents say the community needs more resources to ensure better safety.
Well, you know, you can't stop crime because that's just a part of our society, but still, you can implement cameras in this area. At least you can see who comes and goes and get an idea who may have done this to this young man.
We need more activities for them to do, more after school, more parks built up and things like that, more centers maybe geared towards them being able to release in another way.
Councilman Charles Barron, whose district includes Brownsville and East New York, agrees and has done just that with the new George Gershwin Park in East New York. The park was once a deserted field and an oasis for violent crimes. Now it's a $3.6 million recreational area that includes an Olympic-style track, a renovated basketball court, and new tennis courts. Councilman Barron says his goal was to renovate the space to promote a better quality of life throughout his district.
This is how you say to your community, yes, we're going to bring crime down, but not just bringing crime down, we're also going to bring hope up, and we're going to be healthier, and we're going to learn character.
He's also planning other projects, including a state-of-the-art community center and 2 schools.
We have more impact zones, impact schools, more police in the schools, more police in the neighborhood, and we still have more crime. The answer to crime, I think, is economic development, job creation.
With the city's budget at over $50 billion, he says there's enough money to fund more community initiatives in high crime areas. He adds the city needs the right leadership to get the job done. For Independent Sources, Abby Ishola.
With me to talk about the problem of crime in black communities is Nayaba Arinde. She wrote the story that accompanied the picture in the Amsterdam News, and Richard Green, a longtime community activist and executive director of the Crown Heights Youth Collective. Welcome.
Thank you.
How are you?
Ayande, crime has been going down in New York City for about a decade now. Crime was not even a major issue in the last mayoral campaign. But yet you found some counterintuitive trend in parts of New York City, Harlem, and parts of East New York. What made you follow this story at this time?
Because we were getting so many reports about young kids being shot in the inner city, in South Jamaica, Queens, in Bed-Stuy, East New York, in Harlem, and we were getting story after story. I was talking to parents who were burying their children, like 13 years old, 17 years old. It was ridiculous. So we decided to do the piece. And then we had the poster that Erica Ford did from Life Camp, of 56 kids who died over the last decade or so, from 3 to 25 years old. Babies, new fathers, teens, high school kids. And it was just painful to see all those babies and those kids who just lost their lives to gunfire. Some of them were stray bullets. Some of them were targets of a so-called hit. Some of them were just at the wrong place in the wrong time. And so we decided to put the poster on the front page and have the headline "Murdered," just to shock people into saying this is what we're doing in our community, what is going on, what is the solution. So if crime is going down in other places, fine, but in the inner city, there's still a lot of gun violence.
Richard, what's behind this trend?
Well, one of the main things we found out that if you don't put something as an option to these young people in the streets, they end up taking up the weapons. They call them tools. They have other names that they put on them. So it's obvious that they want to do something beyond what we're seeing. As a historian, I looked at the lynchings from the end of the Civil War to the turn of the century. We will lose more young people in our inner cities that it took in those 30-something years. We'll lose them this year, before the year is over, nationally. So saying that to say that it's an important fact that we have to begin to impound on the minds of these young people the need to remove the guns, remove the kinds of weaponries, and the other ancillary things that keep them going. I just looked at a recent article talking about 10% of the youths that drop out end up in jail or detention.
Well, what can be done? I mean, what is the city, what are people like you doing to stop this trend?
We do it every day. We push. The good thing is the GED. You get a young man his GED and his driver's license, and he's off and running. These are the kinds of programs that we have to begin to implement in our communities. We have to take on this whole notion that we continuously use this notion of the village to raise a child. The village has to step in now and start making this thing happen.
Anything concrete going on besides the GED program?
Well, we just declared a 75-day ceasefire. We started on Halloween because that's a time when we noticed a lot of things would happen. And we're going to Dr. King's birthday. That's 75 days. We did this
in January 15th?
Jan 15. We did it in 1994 when we were up to 2,500 homicides. And we looked at the precincts that we were working in, and we saw a reduction in juvenile incidents. So we're hoping if we could keep one young person safe during this period of time, then it's a grand success.
Nayaba, City Council member Charles Barron is a big advocate in parks and recreation as an antidote to this. Do you agree?
I agree that you have to have something for the kids to do. If you're closing parks at 8 o'clock, there's no community centers, there's no jobs, there's higher unemployment, there's the family life is breaking down in a lot of instances, there's no income, there's no hope. You have to focus. I think it's a failure of city government, of the national government, to focus on this issue of youth boredom, youth violence, youth unemployment. You have to give them something to replace what it is they're doing. And it's not all children, but it's a lot of kids who they have no hope. And it's an epidemic. It's nationalized. Look at Chicago. All the kids who've died, school kids who've died in this past year, it's ridiculous. What are you doing? Why don't you, if you can bail out the big city banks, why can't you bail out the inner cities and give them something? Give them centers, give them trade schools right there they can go to after school or during the day to learn a trade.
You know, it's interesting that none of us are talking about the law enforcement as part of the solution.
Law enforcement has its place, but I want to let every law enforcement officer out there become like the Maytag repairman, nothing to do. You know what I'm saying? I want to be able to pull those young people off the streets. We're going to write something now with this armory, this Bedford Atlantic Armory. We got the city of New York to agree to put a massive youth center there. I'm getting more opposition from even the political leadership. There's a group out there called Charm. These are opposition people, and I'm saying you have to choose between these young people having a place to go to, or else you're going to have them out on the corner hanging, and next thing you know, there'll be some issues happening.
Nayaba, are the police seen as antagonistic, as much of a problem as a solution in various communities?
In the inner city, certainly, I think they're seen as police containment as opposed to trying to solve crime. They stand on the corner and the stance that they take, and it's an automatic stand-up position almost with the police, with these young kids. If you talk to any young people, they will say they don't see the police as protecting them. They see them as trying to frisk them for no reason, harass them, and the way they talk to them, it's just horrible.
Is it only young people who feel that way?
No, everyone is in that mode in the community that they feel that there's that aggressive policing, but that's what happens in the police department now that we've allowed these issues to come in our communities. We have to be able to take our community streets and make them our streets and safe. This way when the police officers come through, they're just sort of passing through. Right now they come through and we sort of hand our young people over to them and ask them to take care of them. And then when they get aggressive, then what
Gary's saying, I think, is that they're seen from the beginning to be aggressive. And some of them, I was talking to a deputy inspector the other day, and I was asking, why are your officers so aggressive? Why are they so rude? Why do they curse all the time? Mm-hmm. And you see, if you walk down the block and you walk behind an officer, you'll hear the language and you're like, what is that for? And I'll say, somebody told me one time that the name they have for young black kids, babies, is future overtime, FOs. Yeah. That's the name they've got for us.
Well, you know, it goes without reason that we have seen that happening in our community, but how does that change? It changes by us being able to take charge of our communities again. We put these young people to work, we get them out of the streets, we stop them from sitting on the top of the...
Isn't that city government supposed to do that? Or
well, government has a part to play in it. But at the end of the day, we as a community have to be able to do that also.
There should be a code whereby if somebody does something wrong, the street, the community checks that behavior.
Oh, that's when I was coming up. That's
the code.
How it was. When I was coming up, the people on the street put me in check. But now it's something that we find ourselves sort of stepping away from that.
Unfortunately, we'll have to leave it at that. Richard Green and Nayaba Arinde, thanks for being with us.
Peace. Thank you.
This fall, we told you about Tehran Bureau, a website where contributors of Iranian descent could file stories on everything from art to politics. The Boston-based website found its niche reporting on the post-election protests that erupted in Iran and other places in June. Independent Sources producer Michelle García found that for the website's New York correspondent, reporting politics can be very personal.
There were huge numbers of riot police who were deployed.
It was one of the biggest news stories, June 12th, when Iranians turned out for the highly contested presidential elections. Just hours after the polls closed, the incumbent, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, was declared the winner. The streets of Tehran filled with protesters charging the election had been rigged.
If the elections were true, then why all over the world and why in Iran all these riots are taking place?
In New York City, Iranian Americans heard the outcry from Tehran and hit the streets.
Where's my vote? Where's my vote? Where's my vote?
In the crowd, taking photos and scribbling notes, was Laila Darabi, correspondent for the online news site Tehran Bureau.
The first thing I said was, this is an event that I attended that I can't report on from a New York Times standard of objectivity. I'm too close to this story. This is the Iranian American community of New York City reacting to something very emotional that's happening in Iran.
From this Brooklyn park, Darabi received updates from her family in Tehran, then passed on the bits of information to her editor. A network of correspondents, journalists within Tehran, delivered on-the-ground coverage.
Our camera and videotape confiscated by police. We filmed the protests on our cell phones.
In Iran, the government responded to the demonstrations by clamping down on the international media, expelling foreign correspondents. Hundreds of protesters and journalists were arrested, with accusations of rape and torture still under investigation. And through it, a frenzy of online citizen journalism emerged.
You know, I was calling Tehran a lot. I know other people were calling Tehran. I'd say a lot of information is passed over Facebook and email and Twitter.
Mainstream media journalists came to call Tehran Bureau indispensable. Journalist and filmmaker Kouross Emaeli is a sought-after analyst on Iranian affairs. He says Tehran Bureau's advantage also proved a journalistic challenge.
Definitely on CNN, it happened on Tehran Bureau, where where there's a mass amount of information, of visual information coming to you, and you have to sift through them. And a lot of times, sometimes you don't know what to trust, what not to trust, because immediately after this process of like twittering and blogging and uploading to YouTube became an important activity. There were things put up that were from different contexts, different countries, different time periods, and all of us relied on them or showed them believing that they're from that specific moment when they weren't.
The election results in Iran were later certified and upheld. For Darabi, the Iranian elections became an intensely personal and pivotal moment in her life here in the U.S., and the media was her outlet.
I felt much more invested. I felt much more Iranian, and I feel like even in my day-to-day life, in my day job, I'm much more representative of, if not Iran, Iranian Americans.
I asked Darabi if her closeness to the story affected her objectivity.
But what you're coming to me for in particular is that insider's view of what is it like to be Iranian American and go to a protest in New York about something that's happening in Iran when your father and your family is there, and what does that government's politics have to do with your life here?
With the elections and its aftermath no longer in crisis, Darabi has returned to her beat covering New York's Iranian arts and culture scene, but this time with a new purpose.
The artists from inside are really reaching out, whereas artists from outside are kind of reaching back a little bit more.
And like the artists whose work is on display, Darabi finds herself reaching inside Iran as the voice of Iranians are heard across the world.
It's kept me much more in touch with my family in Iran. I call so much more often. It's I think made us all think much more big picture about what it means that they're living there and I'm living here.
For Independent Sources, I'm Michelle Garcia.
Tehran Bureau wasn't the only ethnic media outlet that saw its popularity increase last year. While many newspapers were shrinking, El Especialito was expanding its circulation among the growing Latino communities on the East Coast. But success has not come without controversy. There are those who take issue with the publisher's seductive marketing methods. Here's Judith Escalona.
Antonio Ibarria has the Midas touch when it comes to Latino presses. The founder and publisher of El Especial has been growing his brand of weekly newspapers since the 1980s. First with El Especialito, the free weekly newspaper serving New York and New Jersey, then El Especial, available at newsstands.
Well, I create El Especial, and then I start, at that time I had El Especialito here. And then I opened Passaic County, Essex County, Bronx.
While many newspapers, large and small, are shrinking, El Especial is growing. Ibarria's winning formula? Selling to local advertisers and customizing articles for each specific Latino community.
80% is the same content, the other parts, that particular community. You have Washington High, you have a lot of Dominicans, so if I put some supplement about movie star or something about that community, that particular time.
For some, part of the winning formula is controversial. Most of El Especialito issues, for example, have enticing Latina entertainers on the cover. It looks like a newspaper, but reads like a magazine.
And that's what I want to create, a magazine. And this is the side of the paper, see? Still not going to be close to magazine and the very quality paper.
Currently, their website targets advertisers, mapping their paper's circulation within the Latino communities of the Northeast.
We really want to make a big success out of website, because today, that's the way to go today.
Ibarria isn't simply in the news business for personal profit. He's created a foundation to serve the varied needs of the Latino community. Healthcare, jobs, and education are at the top of the list. Plans are to expand the foundation's programs while developing El Especialito and El Especial into national publications. For Antonio Ibarria, who started out a penniless Cuban immigrant with a 4th grade education, that's pretty special. Judith Escalona, Independent Sources.
We'll be right back.
Ethnic media is important because it's a bridge between ethnic communities and the larger American community.
Salman Ahmad is a Pakistani-American rock star who's been building bridges with his music. A writer for the Jewish Forward said Ahmad's music crosses religious and cultural lines. She called him the Pakistani Bono because of his humanitarian efforts. Adola Oladele caught up with him after a concert at the UN.
It makes me feel good, rock all day. It makes me feel good, rock all day. It makes me feel good.
On a normal day, the UN's General Assembly is filled with diplomats discussing global issues. But tonight, artists from various genres of music all perform to raise awareness about the 3 million people displaced in Pakistan due to military operations against the Taliban. The concert is the brainchild of 46-year-old Salman Ahmad.
I don't know how to go, shoot guns and bomb. I know how to play music. So I thought that that's what I should do.
Ahmad says that the themes of his music focus on unity among different cultures and religions. The Jewish Forward compared him to Bono, a rock legend and international philanthropist. Ahmad is also a UN Goodwill Ambassador for HIV/AIDS. On a more local level, he's reaching out to American kids who think Muslim rock is an oxymoron.
It's a question of trust, overcoming the resistance, and having the courage to act.
Ahmad was born in Pakistan. He moved to New York with his family when he was 11. At the age of 13, he attended a Led Zeppelin concert where he saw Jimmy Page play the guitar.
All of a sudden, this guy comes up on stage who has a two-headed guitar. Two-headed guitar with dragons painted on his pants. And I was 13 years old looking at him, and he's making these really mystical sounds out of his guitar. And I said, I want to be that.
But following his dream was not easy.
There was a lot of pressure as a South Asian that, son, you're going to become a doctor. You're going to become a doctor. I said, no, I want to play guitar. No, guitar. I'm going to be a doctor.
Now his band Junoon has become the biggest rock band in South Asia, performing not just regular rock music, but Muslim rock.
I take a blend of tradition, like Qawwali music, which is devotional to God, take that, infuse it with the power of rock.
Although he has sold more than 25 million CDs, the father of 3 boys says some traditional Muslims do not like his style of music. Ahmad has continued to rock on despite the opposition, and many Pakistanis show their admiration of the rock concert.
I think he's doing a great job with his wife, and if there's any, there should be more people who should be doing the kind of work he's doing for the people of Pakistan.
He's very human. And he's very alive.
His favorite quote is from the 13th century Persian poet Rumi.
When you follow the music, it'll lead the way to peace.
For Independent Sources, I'm Adeola Oladele.
Of course. We did some humor stories last year, and we'll end this show with one about pigging out. Jewish dietary laws forbid eating pork, but some young Jews are blatantly breaking the rules. Producer Abby Ishola found out why they see nothing wrong with being hog wild.
Before right away, a hamburger, a turkey on Thanksgiving. How do you know when it's done?
Avram Wiseman's lectures at the Center of Kosher Culinary Arts in Brooklyn are based on kashrut, or Jewish dietary laws.
This is a finished stock.
Those laws permit Jews to eat beef, lamb, veal, and meats from several other four-legged animals slaughtered according to kosher standards. But one of America's most beloved foods is completely X'd off the kosher list.
Jews are not allowed to eat pork because it is specifically banned in the Torah. The 5 books of Moses, the Old Testament, specifically states which animals are allowed to be eaten and not allowed to be eaten.
Yet that hasn't stopped some from indulging in the forbidden fruit. Leah Koenig, food columnist for the Jewish Daily Forward, says this isn't a new phenomenon.
There's sort of a joke that like a Jew will go into a Chinese restaurant. You know, they may keep kosher in their home, but when they go into a Chinese restaurant, as long as the lighting's dark enough and the food's chopped up small enough, they'll eat whatever gets put in front of them.
But Jews who openly eat pork are the focus of her recent article titled "The Swine of the Times," which triggered a heated debate among readers. Koenig says it's become a trend for some to flaunt their pork fetish as a reverse way of proclaiming their Jewish identity. And while pork isn't the only forbidden food for Jews, it's often viewed as the ultimate taboo.
There's been times in history, starting way back with like the Hanukkah story, like the Maccabees, where like Jews were told to eat pork as sort of a way of kind of testing their religion or taunting them for not being part of the larger society. So it sort of has become it's become a very loaded food in terms of the Jewish psyche, I would say.
A food that is a staple in the diets of many self-proclaimed Reform Jews, like Mark Shapiro.
So why do you like pork so much?
Taste. It's, I don't know, like it was funny, like growing up in Texas, and you know, my mom, yeah, she would cook bacon, but she also bought Hebrew National hot dogs. And I always realized that they were okay, but then you go to a baseball game and you had the real like kind of pork hot dogs, and those were so much better.
The full-time music executive also fed off the recent popularity of the bacon explosion, a recipe for a gigantic wrap of bacon and sausage. The portly dish inspired him to launch BaconJew.com, a blog site loaded with comedic sarcasm about the Jewish no-swine law. He even trademarked the word kosher for his Bacon Jew clothing line. Both ventures have managed to ruffle a few feathers in the Jewish community.
I don't think, people understand just sarcasm and having fun with, serious things, like whether it's religion, anything in life, if you got to have fun with it.
Some understand Shapiro's stance, but don't agree.
It's interesting because I feel like that's something I could have done like 8 years ago or something. I could have been part of that website. And now it's something I feel very strongly about keeping kosher and about observing the Sabbath and living my life according to the Torah.
People who go through this expense and trouble to keep that lifestyle would definitely be offended by those who consider themselves as Jewish but don't go through the trouble, don't go through the expense, and don't show any interest of that being an important issue for them to go through life.
Shapiro disagrees.
I'm Jewish. I don't deny it in any way, and just because I eat bacon doesn't make me, any less of a Jew in my eyes.
With that in mind, he says he will continue to eat high off the hog. For independent sources, Abby Ashola.
That's our show. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next year.
In the meantime, be independent-minded.